Greetings, my IT Padawans. On this episode, we're going to take a look at the top 5 cybersecurity features that you need to lock down in Microsoft 365 to keep you safe. And I guarantee this is going to be one session you're going to want to watch. Greetings everyone, welcome back to the channel. Andy Malone, Microsoft MVP, as well as a Microsoft certified trainer. So nice to see you here, and if this is your first time, you are so welcome. I can't tell you, I am trying to build out a great community here, so we want you definitely to be part of this. Now, last week or a few days ago, I posted a question for you on my community page, and I was just wondering what kind of audience we had out then. Surprisingly, well, unsurprisingly, the vast majority were junior IT people, and we had a few kind of senior management role in there as well. So fantastic, great that you're on board, and I really hope that you're finding my channel of use. And thank you so much to everyone who's hit that subscribe button. I can't tell you what that means to me. Now, if you enjoyed this video, of course, go ahead, bump that like button for me. It really does make a difference as I'm trying to build out a quality channel. All right. Now, on this episode, I thought I'd take a look at some of really what I think are the top cybersecurity things that you need to kind of make sure that you've switched on in Microsoft 365. So we're going to look at Microsoft 365. We're going to look at the various products as well. So I'm not just talking about a single feature or 5 single features, but certainly elements within the different products themselves. So definitely stick around, watch the whole episode, because of course, that's how you get maximum knowledge retainment, by watching the whole thing. I am going to time slice everything as well, so if you kind of miss something, then you'll be able to go back and watch it again. Now, if you've not subscribed, we love subscribers, don't we? Go ahead, hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, and you won't miss out on future tutorials. And as you know, I always say this, I love your comments, questions, and feedback. And indeed, so much do I love them that every week I'm going to pick one of you lucky people, and I'm going to go through your question here on air today. So watch out for question time at the end of the demo. All right, it could be your question this week. So I think without any more jibber jabber, I think it's about time we got to the demos. So for my first demo here, and you can see this example, I'm actually running a virtual machine in a lab environment. And in my lab environment, this is my live domain name, all right? Now, one of the most common mistakes that people make in terms of security is, well, it's not a mistake initially. You need to go and verify with this particular TXT record, and this verifies you as a genuine domain. Okay, so you can see up here, if I go into users and then go into active users and go into, let's say, a user account here, the benefit here is that I can go in and I can manage the user's name, and of course I can change the extension of their domain name to be our company name. So if this was bobsboats.com, for example, I could change the user's name here. Now, once you've edited that record and you've made your decisions, of course, the other things that you need to add in are, obviously, you may want to go ahead and configure this. At the moment, you can see I've got no services associated with it. So typically you would probably go in here and you would want to manage your own kind of DNS records here. So again, we just simply go into manage DNS. You can learn about the various DNS records, what are the different types here. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to click on here. Now, really important, of course, is typically we're going to have 3 exchange records to put in. One is the MX record, or the mail exchanger record. That just tells us where the service is. The other one tells the auto configures the client. So this is autoconfigure.outlook.com, really important. But for security, one of the most important records is this. This is the Sender Policy Framework record, or SPF record, and this prevents things like spam. It prevents things like phishing attacks, spoofing attacks. Really, really important that you put that in. Now, if you've got EOP, and of course every customer has EOP, or Exchange Online Protection, it's really not doing you any good unless you've got this record in. So very, very important. Get those DNS records right. Now, as I've mentioned, beware of this mistake. We've noticed a number of attacks coming basically because this record is still existing. And once you've verified this record, this text record, there's really no need for it anymore. So once you've configured all your other records, go ahead and delete that one. Now, just before we leave DNS, I just want to click into Tools on my Windows server, and I'm going to go into DNS here. So one of the most common threats that we're seeing at the moment is attacks on premises servers, especially if they're in hybrid configuration. So if you're managing your own domain name here, or in this case your own forward lookup zone, then it's really important that you use this feature. This is DNSSEC, or DNS security. And you simply go in here and you basically, it installs the DNS security extensions. All right, so and what you're doing is you're signing this, which basically saying that any services or any machines that want to add records to your DNS zone must meet certain conditions and certain rules. So you can see here DC1 at the moment is the main server, and again all I'm doing here is I'm just signing this, and I can then say, okay, which algorithm, which encryption algorithm do I want to sign? So at the moment I'm just going to generate my own signing keys. You can choose the different cryptographic algorithms here. I'm going to choose SHA-512. This is probably one of the most strongest at the moment. And again, I'm just going to accept those defaults, and I'm going to click on this and next, and that is done. And that, folks, will basically just add so much more security to your environment. Very, very important. DNSSEC. So for my number 4 setting, what I want to do is I'm going to come into Microsoft 365, and here we're really talking about default security settings. And in terms of default stuff, we really want to go into settings here and organizational settings. So organizational settings, there are a number of areas, and specifically security and privacy. And really important, if you have an E5 subscription, now I realize that many of you might not have this, but if you do happen to have an E5 subscription, it amazes me how many people don't know about the customer lockbox feature. So if you're concerned that Microsoft or somebody might have access to your data, then you need to switch this on. By default, it's switched off. But basically what this does is if you need to contact Microsoft support, they have to go through a number of different layers of security before they can access your data. And when they can access your data, they need your approval before they can do so. Otherwise, they do not get access. Now, personally, I honestly think that every customer should have this. However, Microsoft have said there is a feature, and yeah, well, okay. That's something we'll agree to disagree on. All right. Now, just another couple of things, again, very importantly, this is really super important. Have you ever noticed that when you sign into a web page, or let's say to Microsoft 365, you've got that little checkbox that says, keep me signed in? Well, this is currently in preview, and this is called idle session timeout. And what this does is when you click on this, you can then say, hey, I only want you to keep me signed in for 3 hours or an hour or 6 hours. So if you're in a bank or some kind of time sensitive job, then let's say the employee comes in the next day, they're going to have to re-sign in again. All right. Absolutely critically important in time sensitive and secure environments. So definitely check out this, currently in preview. It's called the idle session timeout. So continuing with default settings, I'm going to come in here into Azure Active Directories, and I'm going to scroll right down here, and I'm going to come into properties. So here in the properties here, we can see my tenant, and if I scroll down, you can see it says manage security defaults. And what this essentially does is if this is a new tenant and you've not configured any security settings, things like conditional access or multi-factor authentication, you can go ahead and hit that button which says enable security defaults. Now, you'll notice here that I have set up various protections through conditional access, identity protection. You have to watch out here because if you hit that, it will wipe those out. So again, for the purpose of this example, I'm going to say no, I don't want to use the security defaults, and my settings would then prevail. So for my number 3, I'd like to talk about guest access, and specifically guest access security. So in case you don't know, you can invite guests, and this can include things like external members of staff or temporary employees, customers, anybody who you really want to collaborate in your environment. And essentially what this does is if I go into users here, instead of adding a user who is a licensed user, I can invite a guest. Now, an invited guest here, you can see that the invited guest comes in as an external member of the staff on your tenant.onmicrosoft.com. So the other way that you can invite guests in, of course, are simply, for example, in Microsoft Teams. You can simply go in, add a member, and start typing their external address. And when you click onto that, it adds them in as a guest. Now, of course, that's assuming that your security policy allows that. From an admin perspective, however, you need to configure things like the amount of permissions that your guests are going to enjoy. And this can be done in a number of places. And to be honest, it's not easy. So one of the first places that you would come is here in Azure Active Directory. So here in External Identities, I'm going to click on External Collaboration Settings, and this controls everything for your tenant. So irrespective if the user is using Microsoft Groups, 365 Groups, or Microsoft Teams, these are the default settings for your tenant. So again, guest user access. So guess what permissions do those guest users have? Do they have the same access as members, for example, in a team? Or are you going to give them some kind of limited access? Or are you going to restrict it only to specific properties? All right. And that's the most restrictive. Again, who are you going to allow to invite guests? Anyone in the organization can invite guests, including guests. I don't think so. Non-admins, absolutely not. Okay. Members, users assigned to specific admin roles. So, for example, in Azure, we have an admin role called the guest inviter role. Now, to be honest, if you are a group owner in Microsoft 365, you will automatically have that role. All right. Only users assigned to specific admin roles or no one in the organization can invite guests, including admins. So that just means that we don't allow any guests here. All right. Absolutely super, super important that you get this right. Okay. Now, do you want to have any collaboration restrictions? So this is where you can have an allow or a block level. So if there's a particular domain, a company that you don't want your users sharing content with, this is where you can configure that. All right. So these default settings can be found in the external collaboration settings. One additional setting I want to just show you is if I'm going to go back into the 365 Admin Center and I'm going to scroll down to Settings and Organization Settings. One thing that a lot of people, especially folks that have got hybrid environments, if you're still using Exchange Online combined with Exchange Server or older applications, older pieces of software, this is one setting you've got to switch off. All right. So if you've got anything less than Outlook 2013, you definitely want to have modern authentication enabled. Modern authentication is the golden ticket that allows for MFA, multi-factor authentication. So again, here you can see some, in this case, I've disabled older protocols. And the reason for this is because these protocols do not allow MFA. So modern authentication allows for MFA. So it's absolutely critical that you get that right. Okay, so when I talk about file nightmares, of course, I'm talking about storage. And no matter if you're using Microsoft Teams, Microsoft 365 groups, whatever the technology that you're using in Microsoft 365, it's essentially storing your files in SharePoint. And a couple of things we need to think about. We need to think about who's got access to them. So are you going to allow guest access? Are you going to allow sharing, external collaboration? How are you going to protect your data in terms of data loss prevention? And of course, how are you going to retain your data? So 3 very important elements and just a quick demo of how this works. So I'm going to go into my SharePoint online here. I'm going to come into policies and I'm going to go into SharePoint. Now you can see that essentially we have 4 settings and it covers OneDrive for Business and it also covers SharePoint. So of course, SharePoint is all your central storage for Microsoft Teams and Office 365 groups and so on. Now, essentially, we have 4 settings. So if, for example, you set it like this, anyone can share. All right, so anyone, but be careful, this also allows anonymous links, anonymous sharing. So if you shared this to a guest, they could then share it. Oh my God, that could be a nightmare, don't you think? If, however, you did this option, I showed you how to create a guest earlier. This is new and existing guests. So, for example, in Microsoft Teams, I could share a file with a new guest and invite that guest in by adding their email address in. When you add the guest in, it will go in as an external address into Azure Active Directory. Whereas this option here are for existing guests only. So with this setting, you wouldn't be able to, for example, invite guests who are not part of Azure Active Directory. So you would need to go in and speak to an administrator in order to get that guest added to the list. And then finally, this is the most restrictive option here. Only people in your organization would be able to access content here, right? So 4 critical settings. All right. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly go into 365. I'm going to go into Active Teams and Groups, and I'm going to create a new group. All right. So this new group, I am going to call it, it's a Microsoft 365 group. So I'm going to create a new group, and this is called sales planning. All right. And I'm going to click next. I can invite an owner. So I'm just going to bring in Mod, that's myself. And Mod is going to be my owner. Now, if this was a junior admin or somebody within your organization, an owner permission has guest inviter role permissions. So by default, this user would be able to invite guests. Okay. I can also add in some members here as well. So I'm going to go in and I'm just going to add in a few members here just as an example. All right. Now click on next. Of course, I'm going to just create this. This is my, I'll just call it sales one in terms of an email address. It's a public group. You can have either public or private, of course. One interesting thing, by the way, if you choose private here, you can now assign admin roles to this. So that's quite kind of nice if you wanted that. Do you want to create a team for this group? So what this does, it extends the capabilities of the 365 group to include things like third-party apps. Okay, so you can see that's now created. I'm going to close that down. I'm just going to refresh this page. And if I scroll down now, you can now see that we've got this sales. Here's my sales planning that I just created. Again, we now have a settings page, but check it out. This is new, external file sharing. And look, it's now picked up the settings from my SharePoint settings that I have. So at the moment, I can only do these three options there. So the next thing that I want to just quickly mention is data loss prevention policies. And you can find this in the new Microsoft Purview, or recently renamed Compliance Center. I'm simply going to go into policies here, and you can go ahead and you can create, I like to refer to these, by the way, as data leakage prevention policies. So this can be based, for example, on financial, it can be medical and health, privacy, and again, you can create your own as well. So I'm going to, for financial reasons, I'm going to scroll down here, and I live in the UK. I'm going to use the UK financial data. So basically what it's doing is it's protecting this information from leaking outside my organization. Now you can create your own. These are called sensitive information types, and you can easily create a custom policy of your own as well. So I'm going to click on next. I could put some details in. It says, hey, where do you want to protect? So is it particular user or group? Again, I'm just going to say it's everyone here, but check it out. You can see it's monitoring absolutely everything, and it's preventing data from leaking outside your organization. So again, you can, just to say, by the way, you can customize the rule as well. So you can customize it. And let's say, for example, I want to do that. So I can go ahead, I can edit this rule, and you can add additional items in there. So credit card, debit card, and you can also put exceptions in, and you can say, okay, if it detects this, what do you want to do? All right, so I can choose an action, I can restrict access, I can restrict access to third-party apps. So for example, you wouldn't be able to open up a sensitive file in Dropbox or something like that. Again, you can restrict access to on-premises files as well. So users wouldn't be able to send forward things like on-premises files. And it integrates with in-house systems as well. So if you've got things like rights management services on your network. Also, you can see here, you can use protection on things like endpoint. So if you're using Defender for endpoint, you can protect attachments, file attachments that might contain sensitive information. And you can decide who, if you find a piece of sensitive information, how do you want to protect it? So do you want to notify these people that a piece of information has been found. You can customize. You can also do, this is kind of useful, you can also do what we call a policy tip. So before they hit send, it will say, yeah, hang on a minute. This contains sensitive information. Are you sure you want to do that? And you can then say you can allow a user to say, yes, okay, that's fine. I'm going to override it, but you need to put in a reason for that. All right. So that's really quite nice. If you don't click that, by the way, it's just saying, no, you're not allowed to send that out, by the way. Okay. So really, really powerful feature. And of course, you can alert an administrator or whoever's sending that information. So definitely check that out. That is a data loss prevention policy. So at this point, I just want to chip in just with a thought. A worrying trend at the moment is that hackers and ransomware developers are targeting on-premises systems. Now, specifically, Active Directory is becoming a major target. So if you're using tools like Azure AD Connect, then it's really important that you use the latest versions of the product. But more importantly, at this point, I would normally talk about a data retention policy. And it's really important to back up your data, obviously. But it's more important that you actually have not just a copy of your data, but also a disconnected copy of your data. And that data is what we call immutable. It means it never changes, read-only. So if by perchance ransomware did get onto the disk, it's not going to do any harm, and you're still going to be able to recover that data. It's absolutely critical that you have that arrangement. So for my absolute number one nightmare at the moment, we're talking about identity. Now, traditionally, identity has been the easy way into an organization. So for 25 years, tools like Loofcrack, Cain and Abel, John the Ripper, and many, many more password cracking tools have been able to steal users' usernames and passwords. Today, things are getting a little bit more sophisticated. You've got criminals using AI, artificial intelligence, to do phishing attacks on companies and to individuals. During the coronavirus crisis, I'm sure we all seen a market increase in spam email from potential hackers, and they come in even through text messages as well. So how do we protect our users against that? Well, of course, education goes a big way. But Microsoft a little while back introduced something called MFA, multi-factor authentication. And this means that you need a device rather than just a username and password. So if you've got, for example, a Windows 10 or a Windows 11 machine, you can also use biometrics. If you've got an iPhone, you can use a fingerprint and so on. So in the old days, multi-factor authentication was cumbersome, it was labor intensive, and it was also quite expensive. Nowadays, though, it's much more cost effective and much simpler. And bear in mind that later on this year, Microsoft are going to make MFA compulsory. So every customer, everywhere, will have to use multi-factor authentication. Now, the good news about MFA is it can reduce cyber attacks by up to 99%. That's a huge step forward in terms of protection. All right, so MFA and also some of the other identity features that I just want to quickly talk about. Let's take a look. So let's have a quick look. I'm going to click in here to active users. And if you've got a small business, then it's really easy to set this up. You've got multi-factor authentication. Now, to be honest, Microsoft have said that they're retiring this feature. And if you click onto this, they are moving across to things like conditional access, which I'll just show you in a second. But if you still have this tool and you want to use it, it's super simple. All we simply do is select the user, and enable MFA. That's it. So you can enable multi-factor authentication for this user. I can then go back into the settings if I want to. So for example, if you want to, if you've got a problem, the user loses their device, you can restore MFA authentication on any remembered devices. You can require the user to sign in. So rather than request the user, you can actually require them as well. Now, one thing that you can do is if you go into the service settings here, so up here we have something called trusted IP addresses. So you don't get this with the small business version, you only get this with the enterprise version, but you can pop in, for example, the IP address range of your London office, your Edinburgh office, your Oslo office, and that means that basically when users are in the office, they're not prompted for MFA because it's a trusted location. Verification options. How do you want your users to be verified? So, are you going to use the multi-factor authenticator app? So I'm sure you've seen the Microsoft Authenticator app, free to download on Android and Apple devices. So simple to use. All right. So definitely check out that. Again, you can remember the number of MFAs if you want to with that feature. So super simple. The other way that I strongly recommend that you do is if you go into Azure Active Directory, and if I scroll down, we have the Security Center here. So in the security blade, you have got something called authentication methods. And in authentication methods, I can basically set up different policies here. So if you want to, for example, have your users use the MFA app, I can either target all users or only specific users. So another feature that you can also use are these FIDO keys. So if you want to deploy things like passwordless authentication and combine these USB keys with, let's say, for example, biometrics, fingerprints, facial recognition, then this can be a real step forward, especially, for example, in a kiosk type environment, in a call center. That can be really nice. All right. Other things that we've got in here as well, you have got a registration campaign. So this is where you can set up a registration campaign, and you can say, hey, you know, I want to allow my users, how long are they going to have before they're forced to use the Microsoft Authenticator, or before they are, you know, allowed to snooze it. So, you know, yes, I'll come back in a couple of days and register because I'm a bit busy right now. So this is a really nice, gentle way of encouraging your users to register for multi-factor authentication. Okay, so my final thing that I just want to mention is, by the way, still in here, if you must use passwords, and you know some people still do, then you can actually set this. This is your kind of default password protection options, and at least you can go in here and use these custom banned passwords. So you know the usual kind of capital PA $W0RD. And don't be stupid. We all know that a dollar means an S and an @ symbol means an A, and hackers know that as well. So again, definitely put in here those really silly combinations of passwords. And if you must use passwords, I strongly recommend a passphrase. So I love Star Trek TNG. Okay, so typically most password cracking software packages really kind of only kind of go up to 12 characters traditionally. So if you've got long passwords, you've at least got yourself a chance. Yes. The other thing I just wanted to mention, or final thing here, is password protection policies for Windows Server. So you can switch these on, and very, very easy to deploy. You simply click on to learn more. This takes you to the docs.microsoft.com portal. And if you scroll down here, it talks about how to download an agent. So you just download the agent, assume that you're using Azure AD Connect, you're in hybrid, download the agent, just run through the documentation here. Really, really simple. And what this does is it will protect your on-premises password environment as well with these rules. So a really nice feature. Now, of course, password protection is really useful and MFA is awesome. But if you want to take your security to a whole nother level, you definitely want to enable conditional access. So conditional access looks at signals, various signals. So for example, a user who's a member of the sales team is trying to access Microsoft Teams from a specific device at a specific location. Based on those signals, is the user going to get access? Are they going to be denied? Or are they going to be requiring to put in an additional form of authentication? For example, a fingerprint or facial recognition. That's what conditional access is. Now, I'm not going to do a demo here because I've been going quite a long time already. But if you want to see a session on conditional access, then I'll put a link in the description below. And please go off and have a look at one of my conditional access videos. All right. So with that, it's question time. Okay, so this week's question comes from Martin Penton, and Martin has said, do you think that Microsoft Teams will replace Outlook completely within the next 10 years? Strangely enough, I was having a conversation with some friends about this the other day, and it seems that Microsoft is kind of gearing Teams up to be, in fact, an OS. It's almost like an operating system now. It's got so much kind of infrastructure at the back of it, so who knows? I don't know about Outlook, but I can see a unified client coming, Martin. I think that Teams and Outlook will possibly merge, but whether it keeps the name Teams or Outlook, hey, who knows? Thanks for the question, Martin. And if you want your question featured on my question time, then please go ahead and submit your question or your comment down below. And who knows, next week it might be you. So that's it for this week. If you've not subscribed to the channel, we love subscribers. Hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, and you won't miss out on the good stuff of the future. And of course, if you've enjoyed the session, then please bump that like button. It really does make a difference. So that's it for this week. I'll see you next time, and you stay safe. Take care. Hey, thanks so much for dropping by today. Here's a couple of videos that you may enjoy, and while you're here, go ahead, click on the subscribe button and you won't miss out.